The iPhone 15 is dead. Or in other words, the iPhone 15 and 15 Plus have been officially discontinued with the launch of the iPhone 17 line. This means you'll no longer find Apple selling them, and while they may pop up in their certified refurbished section, as time goes on, the iPhone 15 and 15 Plus will disappear from store shelves completely, though the second-hand market will continue to thrive and millions of people will keep using this phone for years to come. And for good reason. It's a good phone, and it brought a lot to the table over the iPhone 14, with features like USB-C and the dynamic island really helping it feel like a modern experience, even a couple of years after it came out. Hey, how's it going? I'm Josh from 91 Tech, and today I want to take some time to talk about the iPhone 15 and 15 Plus, what these phones brought over their predecessor that made them so successful, and what their future may hold. Today we discuss the life and death of the iPhone 15.
Since the very first iPhone, we focused on giving our users a device that's incredibly powerful, remarkably easy to use, and beautifully designed. Today, we're pushing what users love about iPhone even further.
Now again, the iPhone 15 and 15 Plus are not dead in any literal sense of the word, just discontinued, but that doesn't make nearly as good clickbait. But these phones, in complete fairness, are basically dead to Apple. If they're not selling them anymore, they're no longer making any money off of them, so the 15 becomes a non-factor for them moving forward. Luckily, Apple has built much of their success by ensuring customer loyalty, and a big way they do this is by keeping their phones up to date for many years past their discontinuation. Right now, Apple seems to be in a pattern of providing their phones about 7 years or so of software updates. The XR and the XS are the most recent iPhones to lose support, and they came out in 2018, 7 years ago. The iPhone 15 and 15 Plus both perform very well as things stand right now, and the powerful hardware inside with the A16 chipset and 6GB of RAM should be more than enough to get this phone hopefully to at least iOS 30. I think iOS 31 is pretty reasonable, whereas the 15 Pro has the A17 Pro chipset and is the oldest iPhone to have Apple Intelligence support, something that is notably lacking in the iPhone 15 and 15 Plus. It felt so strange to me back around WWDC 24 when Apple was announcing all their big new AI features that were supposed to eventually come with iOS 18. The rollout was a disaster, as it so turned out, and the features are generally quite mediocre, but this was being treated as a huge deal, all at the same time that the iPhone 15 and 15 Plus were still being marketed by Apple as some of the best new phones on the market, and they stood as the entry-level flagship at the time, so you would think they would get Apple Intelligence, right? But no, they didn't. If I had just bought a 15 around the time they announced all this, I would have been pretty choked, but of course, it turns out Apple still has a long way to go in AI, and you're really not missing out on that much anyways. I mean, unless you're absolutely desperate for Genmoji, I guess. So no Apple Intelligence, not the biggest deal, but it does go to show how little foresight Apple seemingly has had with the whole AI boom. The 15 should have been capable of running it is quite silly that it isn't. But still, there is a lot to love for the iPhone 15, so let's start back at the beginning of what was new over the 14. And then we'll discuss why this phone is being discontinued alongside the 16 Pro. After all, this time last year the iPhone 14 was still available at $600, but Apple's lineup does look a whole lot different than it did a year ago, and we'll get to that. Rewinding back to fall 2022, the iPhone 14 and 14 Plus were announced, and were, in my opinion, quite possibly the most disappointing iPhones ever released to date. They were almost identical to the iPhone 13, and not just in design. They used the A15 Bionic chipset from the 13 Pro, which has a single GPU core more than the one in the 13, which makes next to no difference, practically speaking. The jump to 6GB of RAM from 4 was a bit more substantial, but beyond that, and some new color options, the iPhone 14 was nearly the same phone. You have to have a keen eye to tell the 13 and 14 apart. The cameras are slightly bigger on the 14, that's the most obvious giveaway. What was at least a little bit different, but also a negative in my eyes, was ditching the iPhone 13 mini in favor of a new iPhone 14 Plus. The regular iPhone 14 remained at 6.1 inches, also retaining the same reduced notch from the last year. The 14 Pro had just brought in this new dynamic island. The 14 Plus was 6.7 inches, same as the Max Pro iPhones, and I've got my 15 Plus here for scale. These phones still had the Lightning port, and the design not changing at all with the aluminum sides and glossy glass backing had the phone feeling very stale at the time. I mean, iPhones had looked a whole lot like this since the 2020 iPhone 12. That, in combination with the iPhone 14 getting the older chipset, and little to no improvement anywhere else, had me incredibly disappointed in Apple, and that mini option being dropped altogether was a really unfortunate casualty. I know the minis never really sold that well, but I think they were awesome, and as it so turns out, the Plus models never really sold that well either, and the 17 doesn't even have a plus size anymore. I was unhappy because it removed a bit of variety from Apple's lineup. The 5.4-inch display on the 12 mini and 13 mini were so unique within the industry, but big phones like the 14 Plus were definitely not. And the 14 Pro Max wasn't even that much more costly than the 14 Plus anyways for those who did want that bigger size. Basically, the 14 Plus was completely redundant within Apple's lineup and a dumb move. But I digress. Point is, the iPhone 14 and 14 Plus kind of sucked. I mean, don't get me wrong, they were great phones, but that's because the iPhone 13 was such a great phone, and this was basically a copy and pasted model. Apple would need to do a whole lot the next year to win me back, and they would be getting their opportunity with the iPhone 15 and 15 Plus. The iPhone 15 and 15 Plus are the first iPhones alongside the 15 Pro and 15 Pro Max to bring USB-C. Only USB 2 speeds, unfortunately, and that's still the case for any non-Pro iPhone Apple has released since, but USB-C nonetheless. There were plenty of people annoyed with this switch, because it does mean you might need to buy a new charger, but of course the upside is that you might actually not need to buy a new charger, because USB-C is universal. It'll charge your Switch, your PS5 controller, your old Android phone, whatever. Apple was being forced by the EU to switch away from their proprietary Lightning standard, and I do think that's for the best, and I'll give Apple partial credit for this upgrade even if it wasn't one they made willingly. The second big new feature was the addition of the dynamic island, only first seen the year before in the iPhone 14 Pro. I've got nothing but good things to say about the dynamic island, and as much as it's easy to maybe write it off as a flashy but pointless feature, I would argue that it's actually one of the best aspects of iOS, and adds a lot of convenience to the experience. Having media controls among many other things up there is great, and the way everything flows with the animations and darkened pixels around the cutout, it's all just so beautiful in a way. Apple somehow had transformed what should have been a major eyesore into an essential part of the iOS experience, and I was very happy to see it hit the non-Pro models. The display sizes stayed the same at 6.1 and 6.7 inches. Again, what I have here is the 15 Plus. While the most obvious difference from the 14 is the dynamic island, the phone's also got a refreshed design as well. We have this nice soft matte finish to the back glass, and this was the first time a non-Pro iPhone wasn't glossy. The aluminum frame is also a bit more rounded now around the edges, and the phone is a lot more comfortable in the hand than the iPhone 14 was. We are missing the action button, which was brand new with the iPhone 15 Pro. The 15 still has the slider, but this is no big loss in my opinion. Heck, I still use my action button purely for silencing my phone because, I don't know, I guess I'm a boring person probably. Speaking of boring, the iPhone 15 brings a variety of uniquely pale color options, courtesy of that new color-infused back glass. This is probably the least amount of vibrance we've ever seen in any non-Pro iPhone. And there was also no red option this time around, marking the first time since I want to say the iPhone 7 that Apple didn't have any product red iPhone. I mean, they continued to sell other product red phones for a while, but since the SE3 and iPhone 14 were discontinued, there has been no product red iPhone available. Probably has to do with the way they infuse the color with the glass, and truthfully, I was never a huge fan of the shift to this color palette. Thankfully, the next year, the colors on the 16 would pop a bit more. The 17 this year does give me some iPhone 15 vibes, but the colors still aren't as subdued. Of course, what colors you might like or dislike comes down to purely personal preference, and for what it's worth, I think it's fun that Apple tends to change it up yearly. It does help each iPhone model stand out just a little bit more in hindsight, especially when the designs aren't really changing much year to year otherwise. And this is a really nice looking phone too. I love the matte black finish, and the overall look and feel of this phone is just so much more premium than that of the iPhone 14. Those diagonal camera lenses had been like that since the iPhone 13, and then the iPhone 16 would go back to placing them vertically, which was how it was with the iPhone 12, and yeah, I always found that a bit amusing. It was done for a reason, spatial capture, but it's another small thing that leaves the 15 feeling a bit more distinct from the newer models. So, the big two new features we've discussed so far are USB-C and the dynamic island, but I would argue this next one is potentially an even bigger deal, depending on the type of user you are. The 48 megapixel camera that had been first introduced on the iPhone 14 Pro. This was a huge jump from the 12 megapixels we saw on the iPhone 14, which themselves were a minor upgrade from the 12 megapixel sensor on the 13. We also still have the 12 megapixel ultra-wide sensor on the 15, which was great as always. The brilliant thing was this new 48 megapixel lens also could provide a 2x zoom option as it crops into 12 megapixels. So you basically have an extra telephoto option, and suddenly we just have a lot more versatility with this camera setup now, and it was a really solid setup indeed. These were, in fact, really solid phones, but they weren't perfect. For one thing, they lacked ProMotion and still ran at only 60 Hz. While the dynamic island is as dynamic as ever, and those bezels are pretty dang thin, this was a pretty big compromise for an $800 or $900 phone in 2023. Most, if not all, of the Android competition would have a higher refresh rate, making for a much smoother, more fluid feeling experience. But if you wanted that on your iPhone, you would have to go for the 15 Pro, or the 14 Pro or 13 Pro, and it's only just now that Apple has finally given ProMotion to the iPhone 17 as well as the iPhone Air, so it's no longer a Pro exclusive feature, and it's about darn time. The A16 chipset in the iPhone 15 was solid, and it's the same as we had in the 14 Pro. Though the 15 Pro of course got the A17 Pro chipset, so why not just give the iPhone 15 a non-Pro A17 chip? I guess because Apple likes to overcomplicate things, and they would just skip the A17 the next year, giving the iPhone 16 the A18 chipset, and the 16 Pro the A18 Pro chip. So I mean, they fixed things eventually, but it all feels a bit silly to me. We've also got that 6GB of RAM, and outside of the lack of Apple Intelligence support, the iPhone 15 is a really solid performer. Battery life didn't seem to get any better from the iPhone 14, which was actually kind of disappointing, and compared to what new iPhones are pulling off, with even the iPhone Air getting 27 hours of video playback, the 15's numbers do feel a little bit weak. Batteries also do degrade over time, so you might start to struggle here at some point as this phone turns 2, though you may not have bought it that long ago. The 15 Plus being bigger should be pretty good for battery life, I would wager, and the smaller 15 should also get a day's worth of moderate usage, I would expect, at least assuming your battery is still fairly healthy. I've got some friends with the iPhone 15 and they don't seem to be having any issues yet, so that's what I care about. The 15 and 15 Plus run iOS 26 no problem, and again, these phones will get many more years of updates, and with features like USB-C and the dynamic island, I'd say the phone is aging really well. The iPhone 15 and 15 Plus were decent upgrades for their time, and when they launched, the iPhone 13 was still around, as was the iPhone SE 3. Fall 2024, the iPhone 13 was discontinued, and then early 2025, the iPhone SE 3 and the iPhone 14 were both discontinued, with the iPhone 16e taking their place. The 16e at $600 had the design of the iPhone 14, but with only one camera lens and the A18 chipset, making it both better and worse than the iPhone 15 at the same time. I mean, it still got the notch, but considering it was $100 cheaper, it felt like a much better buy than the 15. I mean, the chip inside was 2 generations newer. When they showed off the 16e, Apple didn't even show the 15 and 15 Plus as a part of their lineup, but they were still around at $700 and $800 respectively. And normally with this new iPhone 17 line, we would see the 14 discontinued now, with the 15 and 15 Plus getting $100 knocked off their price tags. But since the 14 was already gone, and they're not going to make the iPhone 15 be the same price as the 16e, they've decided to just get rid of it altogether, which I guess makes sense. It's all thanks to Apple's new budget phone. Not that $600 feels like a budget phone so much as a mid-range phone maybe, but it's as close as Apple is willing to give us. The 15 and 15 Plus only being available for 2 years rather than the typical 3 we've seen in past generations isn't surprising given how we got here, and the iPhone 16 and 16 Plus are still within Apple's lineup, but neither phone is really worth buying compared to the 16e and particularly the new 17. The 16 and 16 Plus now cost what the 15 and 15 Plus cost before these new iPhones. On the used market, the iPhone 15 seems to still often cost around $400 to $500, though prices vary wildly and they could go down now that they're no longer being sold brand new and the new iPhones are out. And for whoever might end up getting this phone in the future or is maybe already using it, I think you've got one heck of a device that's well set up to last years to come. You might be missing ProMotion, but you've got features like the dynamic island and USB-C, and that, along with the 48 megapixel camera, will really help this phone age well. These are really good iPhones, even if Apple isn't selling them anymore, and they're dead in a certain sense. And while the 15 might not have much of a legacy to speak of, these were significantly more exciting iPhones than the 14 for sure, and a positive step for Apple 2 years ago. And I really like the direction they're going now with the iPhone 17 line. But I think that's about it for me. Do any of you own the iPhone 15 right now? How's it working for you? How do you feel about Apple killing it off from their lineup? Make sure to leave your thoughts in the comments down below. If you found this video interesting, please hit that like button and consider subscribing for more tech content. I I often like to do these death of videos after Apple discontinues an iPhone, just as an excuse to talk about these devices in retrospect. I missed the 3rd Gen SE this year, but I do have another one on the iPhone 14's discontinuation that I will link in the description, along with videos going over Apple's new iPhones this year if you're interested. We do have a Discord server, great community over there if you want to swing by and say hi, and huge shout out to the channel members for helping to make these videos possible. Thank you guys so much, and thank you all for watching. I'm Josh from 91 Tech, and I will see you all next time.